The word still or be still is an opposite words for get panic, right? To be still, to be calm, but to get panic is another thing. The United States of America had experienced a series of panicking in terms of the economic issue. And two of these, we can get a look at the panic that the American people had experienced in 1873 and what was the result of the panic. So the panic started with a problem in Europe when the stock market crashed. Then investors began to sell off the investment they had in American projects, and particularly railroads. And back in those days, railroads were a new invention, and the companies had been borrowing money to get the cash they needed to build the new lines. And this panicking of the people, when the Europeans started selling their railroad bonds, there were soon more bonds for sale than anyone wanted. Railroads companies could no longer find anyone who would lend them cash. Many railroads went bankrupt. And one of the biggest banks in New York City was J. Cook and Company. And it had invested a lot of money in railroads. And when the railroads started having problems, J. Cook and Company went bankrupt. And when people saw that such a big bank failed, they began to run to their banks, demanding all of their money back. Then the panic spread to the banks in Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, and Georgia, as well as to the banks in the Midwest, including those in Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. Nationwide, at least 100 banks went bankrupt during the time. 100 banks failed. Another panic that the United States of America had experienced was in 1893. And the panic of 1893 is the worst economic depression the United States had ever endured, as to the writing of the statement. A growing credit shortage created panic, resulting in a depression. Over the course of this depression, 15,000 businesses, 600 banks, and 74 railroads failed. So what an experience. In the Bible, we also have some records of people panicking. We know that because of the sin of Israel, they were under the oppression of the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the people of the East. And thus, all of their crops are being ransacked by the Midianites and the Amalekites. So they find themselves in a secluded place, trying to put the harvest in a secret place so that they can feed their family. It was the time that the Israelites was experiencing a downward trend in their economic as well as in their physical condition. And because of this, the record says that they cried unto the Lord. And when they cried unto the Lord picked up a man by the name of Gideon. And at first, Gideon seemed to be avoiding the responsibility of leading the people in order to deliver them from the hands of the Midianites and the Amalekites. He made reason that I am just, the least among the brethren of the tribe of Manasseh. But the Lord gave him the encouragement that with your strength You are going to be a good instrument to deliver your people. And signs, we know that the Bible stated that he asked from the angel that visited him. He said, wait here, I'll go and prepare your food. So he prepared a goat, butchered a goat, and then prepared an unleavened bread and also a broth. And when he came back, so the angel was still there waiting for him, and he handed the food to the angels, and then he said, put those foods on top of the rock. And using the tip of the rod of the angel, he touched the food, the meat, and the bread. And fire just came out to devour those foods on top of the rock. And not only that, he asked some more. Can you still remember the things that he asked about the fleece? He asked, I'm going to put the fleece here. And, when in the morning I wake up and the fleece is so soaked with water and the ground is dry, that's an indication that, yes, I'm going to go and lead out in delivering your people. And indeed, that happened. About a bowl of water was taken out of the fleece, but the ground was dry. But he was not contented. He asked for some more. He said, Lord, forgive me, but I would like to ask for more signs that indeed you are calling me to deliver the people. And the sign was, if the fleece is dry and the surrounding earth is wet. And indeed, in the morning, that thing happened. The ground was wet and the fleece was dry. And God said, if you're not yet contented, go and check the people. There they are camping down below. Check and observe and find a sign that would indicate that indeed I am telling you that you have to deliver the people. I'm just paraphrasing. And of course, the Lord said, ask your servant Purah to go with you. And they went. And of course, when they approached, there was two people conversing with each other, and the one was relating his dream. And the dream was just a cake rolling down, coming from somewhere, and hit the tent. And the tent, turned upside down. And the interpretation was, that bread, that cake, piece of cake, that turned upside down the tent, is a symbol of Gideon. He is going to overthrow us. And upon Gideon's hearing, he went and convinced that the Lord indeed is going to use him as an instrument to deliver the Israelites under the dominion of the Midianites and the Amalekites. So he called up some of the tribes, and they came, and the numbers, if I can remember it clearly, 22,000 first went out, and then another 10,000 that brings us to 32,000, with the 32,200, and with the remainder of the 300 people that the Lord said, let them stay. So about 32,500 people gathered during the time, ready in order to make battle against the Amalekites and the Midianites and all the people of the east during the time. But the Lord said, this is too much people. The Lord is so particular that the activity of winning or the result of winning should not be attributed to the number of people that participate in the war against these people that oppressed the Israelites. So the Lord said, this is too much. And of course, the process was made, and only 300 people left. And they don't have swords in their hands. What do they have? A trumpet on the right hand, and an empty pitcher, on the left, with a light, a lamp inside the pitcher. And Gideon said, follow what I do. And then, of course, when Gideon blew the trumpet and he broke the pitcher and took the lamb, so the rest of the 300 people followed the same thing. And the record tells us in the book of Joshua, chapter 16, that the Midianites, they were all confused, they were all afraid. And the confusion and the feeling of being panic resulted to they kill one another. So see the result of panic. That can also happen to us, brothers and sisters. When we become panic, when we become angry of something, we become unreasonable. And most likely all our decisions are all towards failure. The Israelites have experienced the same thing. I've been talking to you about the experience of the Israelites being led by God to get out of Egypt. They were put in a place where when they go to the south, there's that great mountain, Rocky Mountains. They cannot just go there. And then thousands upon thousands and the many chariots of the Egyptians were already there. So if you are one among the Israelites, what will you do? Most likely, you or I will be panicked, right? I will be panicking during that time. But the Lord's demonstration of His power in delivering the people from Egypt have sunk in the mind of some of the people that were joining that more than 600,000 individuals, including the mixed multitude out of Egypt. And when they were put in a situation where they cannot just move forward because the Red Sea was impassable, they cannot just turn to their left because there was that Rocky Mountains, and then behind them the chasing company of the Egyptian soldiers. In verse 13 of Exodus chapter 14, it says, going back to 10, I'm sorry, Exodus 14 verse 10, it says, Exodus, and when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. And they were sore afraid, panic. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. In verse 11, it indicated that not all of them cried unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt us thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Verse 12. Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. So they had forgotten the manifestation of the power of God in delivering them from the land of Egypt. And this is a challenge for them. To instead of murmuring and complain against Moses, this was the time supposed to be for them to cry to the Lord and trust Him and cling to His power. Because they know that, of course, in the past experience, that the Lord is able to deliver them out of these things. But instead of doing that, the account of the patriarchs and prophets about the exodus of the people of God mention that even the pillar of cloud that guide them the way, that lead them on the way, they misinterpreted it as an omen, a bad omen for their destruction. That was not the kind of interpretation that the Lord was expecting them with this pillar of cloud, they should be thinking that indeed the Lord is with us. The Lord is leading us. And now here's the problem. He's going to deliver us. In Romans chapter 14, verse 5. Romans chapter 14, verse 5. 15, okay? 15. Romans 15. Could you go back to 4, Jeb? Verse 4. For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning. So the account of the crossing to the Red Sea, the account when the people of God were cornered, nowhere to go, were recorded in the scriptures and were written for our learning. Every day in our life experience, you will notice that there is always a trial of faith, right? I don't know if you are experiencing that. Every day of our lives, we are always confronted with the testing of our faith. Even from the smallest thing in life, the kind of food that the wife is cooking, cook rice, but it is not according to what we expect. It's too wet for us or too dry for us. That would be an occasion for complaint. When we go and walk on the road, sometimes we stumble and others curse. Cannot just hold their emotions. Every day there is that situation that exposes us to the trial of our faith. And we have seen it in the life of the Egyptians. They were given the promise that they are going to be out of Egypt. But there is that opposition. The king of Pharaoh won't like them to do that. And signs after signs were given, but Pharaoh maintained the hardness of his heart, that he will not let them go. So what kind of frustration that they have experienced during the time? They wanted to go out because they've been in Egypt being a slave for 400 years. And they were not able to sacrifice to the Lord using animals, because animals, when they do sacrifice to the Lord, is prohibited in the land of Egypt. Because animals were made as the Egyptians' god. That's why they requested that they are going to move out of Egypt, that they can sacrifice to the god. Just imagine, for 400 years, without connection with the God through the giving of sacrifice, without the idea that one day heaven is going to send the sacrifice in order to cleanse us from all our sins. You will understand that. For 400 years, why they have such kind of attitude? They were exposed. Yes, some of them believed. Now they move forward. Now they were cornered. No way out. A test of faith. And then the Lord again demonstrated His power. He parted the Red Sea. They crossed. And then after 3 days of walking, another confrontation of the trial of their faith arrives. No more water to drink. What will we do? And there again, the Lord had demonstrated that He can provide water. Then after that, and then the test of the shortage of food, the Lord permitted them to experience. They again murmured, they grumbled and complained. Every day seems to me that there is that trials of faith that they were experiencing. And now they were about to be in the border of the promised land. We know that in Horeb they complained for water, right? And the Lord said to Moses, go.
at the rock and strike the rock once, and water will come out. And Moses did that. And that water sustained them for many, many years. He did not stop. And Paul made an account in the book of Corinthians, letters to the Corinthians, that the rock was a symbol of Jesus Christ. So he was the one who let the water gust out of that rock that Moses struck with his rod. They were looking forward. They have seen the hills of the promised land, and they have to march forward from the place where they have enough supply of water. And that day, water stopped flowing. But before that, the Lord made a promise. You are going to go straight, and you are going to pass to the land of your brothers, and you are going to buy water and food for them. So the Lord had permitted them to just walk for probably how many days without water in order to test their faith and to cling to His promise that they are going to have water. But what happened? Their faith was tested. And not only their faith was tested, even the faith of Moses was tested. They moved forward. They complained more against Moses. And the records I have in the patriarchs and prophets tells us that they were now aged, referring to Aaron and Moses. Long had they borne with the rebellion and obstinacy of Israel. But now, at last, even the patience of Moses gave way. And this is what he said to the people of Israel. Hear now, ye rebels. He cried, must we fetch you water out of this rock? God told Moses, gather the children of Israel and bring them with you at the rock and speak to the rock. Just speak to the rock and water will come out. God made a promise. But the tenor of his statement here, according to Ellen G. White, is tainted with unbelief. Must we fetch you water out of this rock? God made a promise that just speak and the water will flow out of the rock. And instead of speaking to the rock as God had commanded him, what did he do? He smote the rock twice with the rod. So was it an obedient act on the part of Moses? He was a leader. Remember, Moses at his time was already old. And when they first reached close to the bank of the Red Sea, he was the one who said to the Israelites in verse 13 of Exodus 14, he said, with all the composure of emotion, he said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Almost 40 years had gone, and Moses is old. And at this time, even though he was said to be the patient man on earth, he lost control. of his emotion. He lost control of emotion. Yes, the water gushed forth after striking twice the rock in abundance to satisfy the host. But a great wrong had been done. Moses had spoken from an irritated feeling because of the rebelliousness of the people of God. He had spoken out of an irritated feeling. His words were an expression of human passion rather than of holy indignation because had been dishonored. And he said, "Hear now, ye rebels." This accusation was true. The Israelites were rebellious people. But even truth is not to be spoken in passion or impatience. Repeat, even truth is not to be spoken in passion or impatience. When God had bidden Moses to charge upon Israel the rebellion, the words had been painful to him and hard for them to bear. Yet God had sustained him in delivering the message. But when Moses took it upon himself to accuse them, the people of Israel, he grieved the Holy Spirit. And as a result of this, the consequence, that even for how many times he tried to appeal to God that he will be brought to the promised land, that his footsteps can have a mark in the promised land, but the Lord declined to give a positive answer to the request of Moses. As leaders of the church, because this was written for our learning, it is not a guarantee that I am a pastor, you are an elder of the church, or whatever position you have in the church, that we will not fail, because we're just human beings. We are supposed to do these things, the ideal things, but we fail. And this will constantly tell us that we need our God. We need Him. And that's Mrs. White made again. He made again a statement regarding trials and temptations, that they are being permitted by God to be experienced by His people in order for Him to be closer to our God. So this is an encouragement for us, that the God that we are serving is a long-suffering God. And it is better for us to understand Him, to know Him, because knowing Him brings us to a positive result. When we know God as a long-suffering God, when we failed, we should not be frustrated. A righteous man may fall 7 times, but he will stand up and then go to the Lord. Trials and temptations will reveal our conditions before our God. We reveal that without Him, we cannot do anything. We cannot fight against our natural inclination to commit sin, because our nature is sinful. Right? Our nature is sinful. So it is hard. We want to do things right, but we cannot do it. And the Bible is telling us that we cannot do it really, but not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, said the Lord of hosts. Trials are given in order that we can realize our weaknesses and that we can move forward to the source of strength, and that is God.
Psalm 46 verse 10, be still and know that I am God. You're well versed of the power of God and how He led the people in the past. The raining of manna, the giving of food to Elijah through the raven, and then the continued supply of oil and flour in the household of the woman in Sarephat. You know that. When John 17 verse 3 tells us, and this is life eternal, that they might know you, the only true God, and your Son, Jesus Christ. The word know there, brothers and sisters, it's not just a brain knowledge. It is an experimental knowledge. So I try to look at the dictionary as to the meaning of experimental knowledge. So this is something to do with experiential knowledge. That we ourselves have experienced that indeed the Lord is good. That we ourselves have experienced that the Lord is answering our prayer. That He strengthens. And this is enough that we trust in Him. When the Lord redirected the direction of the Israelites in going to Canaan, instead of passing through the land of the Philistines, going to Canaan, He diverted them. Moved towards the shore, towards the shore of the Red Sea. Why? Because out of His mercy, He knows that the people was weak. And the Philistines were men of war, they were equipped. Israelites doesn't have equipments for the battle. And it is just telling us that the God that we are worshiping is the God of judgment. Is the God of concern. And His plans for us is always for our good. Shall we not trust in Him? When we think that it is best for the church, and others think that is best for the church, contrary to what we think is best, Moses will tell us in Exodus chapter 13 verse 14, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. It's time for us to practice submission to the will of God. It's time for us to set aside our personal emotion. It's time for us to ask God to help us control our emotion, that even in the speaking of the truth, we cannot grieve the Holy Spirit by being irritable. Yes, nobody is immune to sin. There's always a possibility that we will fall into sin. But let's look at that possibility as an instrument in the hands of God that will drive us close to Him, to cling to Him, to cling to Jesus Christ, who said in John 15, without me, you cannot do anything. Let's cling to Him and stand and be still and see the salvation of the Lord.